Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bob.
And good afternoon to Jack Walrath, our special guest today. I'm Bob Mover, and this is our little podcast, which we call On the Real Side. You'll hear that background music, and that's Walter Davis's tune, Walter Davis Jr.'s song called On the Real Side. And I'm very happy to get a chance to talk to, I think, one of the great jazz musicians of our time, of my generation, and somebody who really should have a lot more recognition, like a lot of us. But he's been around for quite a while, and has had quite an illustrious career, and continues to have one. And Mr. Jack Walrath, um, welcome, Jack. And I was I remembered that when years ago when I was playing at a club called Barbara's, you and
Right.
John Tank, our friend John Tank, wonderful saxophone player, used to come and sit in with me sometimes, and we'd hang out. And there's one conversation. Now it's been a while back, but where we discussed your roots, kind of your upbringing. And
Right.
I remembered that, you know, um, well, you had a very unusual family background. I think you spent your early years in a place called Stewart, Florida,
Well, that's where I was born, but I moved.
Montana or something, right?
Right,
Go-
and when I was like 3 months old, we went out west. First, we were living with some cousins in Wyoming, and then we moved up to Montana in a
And
town with like 100 people.
right, and I thought it was a funny thing in your biography. It says he developed a healthy perception of music from lack of negative peer pressure, which so often happens in cities.
I think so. Yeah, he's supposed to. That guy's not hip. This guy. I mean, even when I went to Berkeley, like people would say this guy's not hip. you know. Like we have, one of the ones they said is Dave Brubeck wasn't hip because I suppose because he had a hit, but also the thing is look at some of the tunes he wrote, and also there's this I found this old LP where he wrote for an octet. And it's out there. It's great. So,
I
you know,
remember that record.
he
Yeah,
wasn't supposed to be hip. And
before
some of
Paul
these,
Desmond, a guy named Dave
yeah, but the Paul Desmond one's
Burnett.
supposed to be hip. It's like that was just peer pressure when you got to Berkeley, and since that was my first real exposure to modern jazz, when I went there was um, except I went to a camp in California and I met a guy named Mac Goldsberry. Did you know Mac?
I knew Matt Goldsberry. He
Yeah,
used to sit in with Vinnie Burke in New
yeah.
Jersey. He was from Jersey.
Well, I met him, and there was another guy named Jim Herbert, who is now Brandy Herbert, was a guitar player. These guys were really good, and they were going around with sunglasses and they were trying to, and everything, and they hit me to Cannonball Adderley, but I only heard the records. I never heard of these bands live till I went to Boston, and and they were saying, "Well, Thelonious Monk, that's not even music." And Miles Davis, that's not music.
Saying this.
And but by that time, I don't know. It's just maybe I'm a contrarian, but the first thing I did when I bought join the Columbia Record Club and buy Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk, you know. And then Coltrane wasn't supposed to be hip. That was too wild. You know what I'm saying? But then the first Coltrane record I had was a guy gave it to me was the one with Cecil Taylor, and I
Right, with
said,
Kenny Dorham,
Kenny Dorham, right?
like someone in love.
Right. And that was so every time somebody says something is really bad, I will probably check it out.
Yeah, well, you haven't changed.
I know that's why I have all this stuff. I always looking for, and I'm still looking for the lost chord. They got to take me out kicking and screaming. Like
But I got to
move.
backtrack to like your family. But now, was there? Were you an only child? You had brothers and sisters.
Yeah,
How big?
one thing I just wanted to mention, Muhal, Richard Abrams said a great thing to me. He says, a bad review is bad and a good review is worse. It's true.
Well, you've got to live up to it, And then sometimes they like you for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that happens with good reviews sometimes. See, you know,
Okay. Okay, so we can go on where you left off about
All
the
right. So
family.
your family, were you a large family, small family? How many were there of you?
I was the
And
only child. I was the only child.
and your parents were rather to the right politically, one might say. I
Oh,
remember.
they're totally, totally. They would have voted for Satan if he was a Republican, you know.
Right. I remember you telling me that. You had me on the floor laughing that night at Barber's when you and John and I were talking. You described your childhood. You said they were somewhere to the right of the Birch Society.
Yeah, well, I was, I was I was the top of my class in my high school reunion. I gave a speech with all this right wing shit, with the impeach Earl Warren and all this. Everybody's a communist, and people were walking out and everything. And now the parents were walking out. Now those kids are like that. But as soon as I got to Boston, and I took a walk around the block, I said,
Galloway
"Hey,
Street. You saw what was
yeah,
going on.
yeah, yeah,
You
really."
went over to Wally's, right? You
I,
took a
you
look.
know, I even went to the headquarters of the John Birch Society once just to see what it was, and uh, it was a book club. Basic, read this book. That was basically what it was, and it was like, I was out there, but then I was out there with anti-Vietnam and shit and everything. That's one thing they were, as anti-Vietnam, but the thing is, you take a walk around the block. But I was raised about that. That's all I knew.
Well, that's what I
You
mean.
know,
Within 5 years, you went from being a right wing, a Birch Society, almost Ku Klux Klan person with racism and
more less than that. It was like a month. As soon as I got to Boston, if it was that long, and I saw that there wasn't a communist behind every bush and all this bullshit. You know what I'm
well, what
saying?
made you? In other words, like okay, now I'm trying to get the picture here. You've got these right wing views, and you're making a speech like this, but yet you have an interest in music and in jazz specifically. Had you heard jazz yet, or was that when you came
Well,
to Boston?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing I got more into. I was into Goldwater. I liked the Goldwater. I mean, there's still things I like about him. He said later on, said, "These people, Republicans, don't count me in that for that." And he also wanted to legalize marijuana and gays in the military. Fine. I mean, he would be called a liberal nowadays.
You
But
would.
but after I even worked for the election. After that. Um, I just lost interest, but the music, started grabbing me, and so all that other crap was, and you just talk to people and all that other went by the, it turned out to be a bunch of crap. I mean, it was, but I'd never really heard anything else when I was growing up. I mean, not just my parents, but my dad was one of 8 children. And so I had all these aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody that were all into that. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So it was,
How did they
um,
feel after you had your change of character,
well, they
really?
weren't too pleased about it. They weren't too pleased about it. I was, um, uh, I was a totally different person, and then, I mean, especially the summer love, I even went to a family reunion on acid. And one of my cousin's
Oh,
wife wanted to meet me in the hills. I was
really?
with the acid. I was very good. That changed my personality because I was always paranoid. Thought everybody was out to get me, and that was good therapy because what happened was I was able to be outgoing and gregarious and positive. I never got paranoid on it. But
You
it's
took a lot of acid? Did you take?
well, I don't know. I had my fair share, maybe 50 times,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
did it once.
enough. Maybe not even that many times because if you took it and you took it the next day, it wouldn't do anything. So you had to wait a while, because um, that was changed my outlook. I was um, I noticed that everybody's not out to get everybody, and I couldn't see all this finding God stuff. I said, this is well, they're just a drug. They're using it in therapy now. Again, they finally come back, and I read a book when it first started, and Mingus and Raymond Ferguson were with Timothy Leary. First, they started out with mushrooms. I didn't know that. They were a
Yeah,
big
and they
part of
all like
that.
to go up to Millbrook. I
Yeah,
think Millbrook was the place where they were hanging.
yeah.
They told me they went up there. I think, yeah, quite a few people had
Yeah,
a little taste of that place.
yeah, yeah. Well, the mushrooms, that's the best one. That's of course I haven't done anything in 20 years, but
Well, mushrooms
mushroom
I used to like too because
it
no
only
matter
lasts a
where you
couple
went,
hours.
a
Yeah.
chair stayed a chair. I mean, the hallucinatory aspects of it was very marginal
Well,
compared to
the
other people.
first acid trip I took was with a good friend of mine when I was going to Berkeley, a guy named Jules Rowell. He's on the West Coast and he's a trombone player, one of the only ones I can stand. And he was the very first acid trip we took was you look at a brick wall and things would be skimmed and all that stuff. We said, hey, let's go sit in with Freddie Hubbard. It was a matinee, so we went and sit in on Freddie Hubbard's band.
Did you sit in?
Yeah.
Because it was
We
such.
sat, and Freddie Hubbard was always a good friend and supporter for me. He would even show up at a couple of my gigs sometimes.
Yeah,
He
Freddie's a
did.
nice cat. I liked it
Yeah, he
too.
was. Everybody had problems with Freddie, but he always had a good time. He wanted me to take his band over from once because his chops were out, and I said I wasn't going to do that. So it was a very red clay. I'm not going to do that, Freddie. That's your band, man. And um, I don't know. I didn't really know the head on red clay anyway. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
right.
saying?
So
Was
it's
my
not difficult. That's one of the simpler ones.
I know it's not my priority. Actually, it's in a good key though. It's what is D flat minor.
Uh-huh.
And but Clark Terry did have me take over his band for a tune once.
Really?
Yeah, I sat in with him. He said, "Take the band. I'm going to go to the bar. What shall I play?" I don't know. Embraceable You. So I knew the melody. I didn't know the changes, but I just played it by ear, and I guess it seemed to be okay. And so
So
anyway,
you heard a lot of cats. I mean, you when you were first at Berkeley, like that, the year we're talking about is about 66, 67, somewhere around there.
I started in '64 and graduated in '68. I
So
was the
that's like,
very first formal graduating ceremony with John Abercrombie and Calvin Hill. I remember a couple of the guys,
was
and
Mraz there then too, or
he was there. He came there for a while, yeah. And Miroslav Vitos and
Miroslav, right?
what's his name? Byrak was there. They came towards the last time I was there, and
No, there were no textbooks. You said there was like
no
no.
textbooks, no textbooks. Yeah, they were the guys that actually did it. you know, and the teachers that I guess there's tech now they can take a grade off if you don't do they've been doing this for decades.
But
They
they
take
heard
it.
her Pomeroy was there,
Oh
and
yeah, John Laporta,
Charlie
I
Mariano.
Charlie Mariano, yeah, um, Phil Wilson. Um, now they take a grade off if you don't do your lessons on a computer. And now
So
they're giving like honorary doctorates to people like Justin Timberlake and Missy Elliott and those kind of. Did you
yeah,
ever
they've
not see
become
that?
very
It's
very
not,
commercial.
I went back and there. I had a girlfriend. I stayed in the dorm. She was 20. This is about I don't know, almost 40 years ago, and she was. I was with her and two other girls, young girls. That was fun. And they had her Palmer had come back and they had him stuck away in a corner you know. And the good thing about Berkeley is I've derived a kind of my own harmonic concept that grew out of the last couple of records. The last records I wrote for Ming is I got my own harmonic concept. I kind of had one before, but anyway, it was like I told Herb Palmer about it, and I said, and he said, Jack, really, man, this is above my head, man. And I said, that's good, Herb. It shows you're a good teacher because you inspire people to think outside the box. At least he did me. I put bicycle chains in a piano once. I mean, we used to do the record, and I had a tune on a record. And Tom Harrell, when I first met him, said he heard it and he got the give a score, and I was as a blues and F, and I it's a sharp 9 chord, and I had it was a G7 sharp 9, and I had like the major third up on the in the chord up over it, because the thing is, if the piano player plays a sharp nine chord, you probably play a natural nine in your solo at some point, you know. I mean, you know, just because they're playing a sharp
Well,
nine,
then
like
it functions as a neighbor note to the sharp nine.
yeah, well, yeah. Miles Davis would play a natural nine on a sharp nine for a whole note or something, you know. And also they had the guys used to. I've been looking at Sonny Rollins a lot lately and everything, and I was doing things. I was wondering what's this about using major sevenths on dominant chords. Those guys did that all the time.
Oh
They
yeah, and the
played that,
blues it was
you know.
very.
It was. There's a lot, you know, that I mean, there's no rules in music. What they teach is cliches, so you can, you know, just know a little bit about a genre. I mean, Bach used uh, uh, parallel octaves and fifths sometimes, just not that often.
Well, I
You know,
think that yeah, the cliche kind of just gives you. It's like a finger pointing toward the moon, as opposed. And then they say never mistake your finger for the moon. You know, the cliche will show you. Oh, okay, this is what a sharp nine sounds like.
right,
Ba-ba-da-ba-da,
right,
into that, but it's not suggested you play that every time you get a sharp nine. Then you're
right,
supposed to have an imagination
right.
on
Well, that
top of
was
it.
the jazz workshop. These are the chords. These are the scales you'll probably play on the chords most often, you know, but you know, you can play any note on a chord. And in fact, the thing is like one of the things I've had this thing with this guy that's teaching at this college won't have me out to Turner Dominguez class. He thinks I'm illiterate or something. Um, it's like not having St. Peter talk about Jesus, right? And like one of the things he was looking at one of my charts one day. Oh, I see here that you have the on this dominant chord you have the natural fifth in the melody, but you have the flat five in the bass. Maybe if we play it soft, and they'll think, you violated the low interval limits rule. I mean, this is like stupid stuff. You know what I'm saying? I mean, every chord has a flat five in the bass, and I mean, and but the thing was, is this? You know, I never remember. I remember it was like maybe the the fifth semester, fourth or fifth semester, where we went into Herb Pomeroy's class and Duke Ellington class, right? And I remember pretty much verbatim the first thing out of his mouth. He said, "Remember all that stuff we told you about flat nine intervals and lower interval limits? You're going to forget all that here, you know."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like here's a guy running a judging my music that I'm not qualified to teach a class on Mingus, you know, and um, uh,
That's pretty ridiculous.
and yeah, I'm not qualified to teach on Mingus, and he's trying to tell me about stuff we had in the first semester at Berklee. I mean, the first year at Berklee, you could write a Basie chart. No, I don't know what you can do. I mean, years ago, even when our Bears, it was only four horns. They were weeding and everything out then, you know, and that was like '69, and they started doing that in my last year. But I'm, you know, and this guy, I'm not. The thing is like there's this chart that he's a feature on all over YouTube, and he didn't complain about that, you know. And I break all kinds of rules, you know, rules. There are no rules. It either
Well,
sounds good or it doesn't,
I
you
think
know.
there's a certain amount of protecting their gigs that people do that have these university gigs, and they, you know, I mean, there's a thing at the new school. I think years ago they threatened to strike, and so if you have something you want to teach, if it absolutely can't be taught by anybody who's already in the new school,
Yeah.
then maybe you have a chance to teach it. But if it can
But
possibly be taught by somebody in the new school, you're not going to get to teach your class.
well, you know, I have a guitar player in my band. I don't know if he still teach. He was teaching at Berklee, but he went into he got a Guggenheim for he's going into microtonal stuff, and he was a guitar player in my band, and he would tell people that he got a lot of his harmonic concept from me, and he was teaching at Berklee. Maybe he was teaching some of that, but also he got a Guggenheim, and uh, I used him as a reference to try to get. I didn't get the Guggenheim, but I was using a guy as a reference. It might have been teaching some of my stuff that helped him get his Guggenheim. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I believe that.
It's irony, It's funny how things happen like that. Like he mentioned the record with Willie Nelson I did with Willie Nelson. He sings ba da 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 da. He sends a flat seven like a first four bars of a blues.
Right.
It's not it. That's not it. It's da 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 da. It's down to the
Down to
fifth.
the fifth.
And Cassandra Wilson put out this record, and it was a big hit for her, and she sings it, and she does that. I just know. I mean, they were giving things to the record company, tunes. So why don't you try this tune for people? I just know she heard my version. That's why she did that, because
She
that's
put the flat seven in.
yeah, that's not how the tune goes. And like, well, Joe Locke would one time he was trying to get a date, and he sent him a demo with a bunch of tunes, and it was he wanted to call it the New Standards, and Herbie Hancock put out a record called the New Standards, and they used some of those tunes. So the record companies will do that. It's not I don't think the artist's fault. I was doing record reviews and stuff, and usually the artist doesn't. It's some producer or some other guy stick his finger in it that makes it, that can ruin a record. You know what I mean? I think of Sonny Rollins' record, his so-called bossa nova record, where he plays this track with just him and congas, and he plays harmonics for like 10 minutes. And they thought it was bossa nova.
Yeah, right. Well, they have that's because they played "If Ever I Would Leave You" and "The Night Has a Thousand Eyes" as a
Yeah,
kind of bossa nova rhythm. And Ben Riley said that was actually the first record. He said that was before the Stan Getz, which I'm not sure if that's true, but he said that he put that rhythm on because he was hip to the bossa nova
yeah,
rhythm, that they did that. And then that one called Bluesongo
yeah.
has nothing to do with bossa nova, which is
Right,
the chorus and this and that, which is more like an African,
right.
pseudo African, or I don't know, some other culture, but it certainly wasn't any. Didn't sound like Brazil to me, though it could have been northeastern influence. I don't know,
Yeah.
but that track doesn't have nothing to do with it. But I think the whole thing is that maybe Stan Getz it hit with the bossa nova, so a lot of people were calling everything bossa nova.
Yeah.
They just wanted it to.
I
But
think that's changed because it seems to be much more laid back than the people the things the
well,
things nowadays are really on top. You know what I
well, the
mean?
bossa nova was different than the samba. See, the whole thing that made bossa nova. I lived in Brazil for a while, so it was explained to me that Roberto Menescal, who created the first bossa nova, which was called O Barquinho, they call
Yeah.
it Little Boat. That
Right.
was actually the first technical bossa nova, and he
Okay.
was an architect.
Yeah.
And so this was a music that the upper classes could relate to, where the samba, that it was a little too dirty, it was a little too street. And so all of a sudden, bossa nova was something that the not just the lower class, the music of the povo was
Yeah.
the samba, and that was
Well,
your.
lately sometimes people say I've been playing it wrong. And the thing is like I said, they sent me examples, and now it's just boom right on the beat. Like I'm saying, it used to be more freer, I think. And I used to play with a guy in LA named Moser Santos. You ever heard of him?
I've heard of him. Yeah,
He was,
I think I know it. Yeah,
he even searched for me in New York. He wanted me to play on a record, but I was in New York, and he was the teacher of Baden Powell, and I think Joe Beeman. He was their teacher, and I
yeah.
never had any problem playing his sambas and his bossa novas. You know what I mean? I think it's changed over the years. It's more
Well,
like jazz now. It's more
Dahum used to come over and visit
technical.
me.
Yeah,
Dahum used to come, and we were
yeah.
friends. And he
I
come over
think
to my place, and we listen to music. And he had this thing that he used to say when the rhythm section, when he'd be listening to a record of bossa nova or samba, he'd go like this, like, here's your rhythm, 1, 2, 1, 2. Chega pra lá, deixa Chico escutar. Chega pra lá, deixa Chico escutar. Chega pra lá, deixa Chico escutar. And he'd be repeating that. It means come over here, chega pra lá, Deixa Chico escutar. Let Chico listen.
Yeah.
So he said if he can say that, it's swinging. If
Yeah.
he said go, chega pra lá, deixa Chico escutar. Chega pra lá, deixa Chico. Then he's not doing it right. And,
Yeah. Well,
you
it's
know,
probably like everything else. It's everything. It's so technical. We live in what they call the postmodern age, where form trumps content. You know what I mean? It's there's a guy. I did a record with this record company. I did. Pow! I did this thing. So I'm going to take that out of there. I wanted that in there. There was an effect I was trying to get, and he took it out of the. He took it out. Everything is more technical now. I was one time I turned on um, uh, a Britney Spears show on TV, and
Jack, keep talking. Give me a second. Tell me the story. I'm just gonna be off and get a mute for a minute because I need to do a medical thing. But I'm hearing you.
okay, I did watch a Britney Spears show just to see what it was all about, and it was a live show, and there was screens. And art is supposed to be form and content. Well, this is all form. I mean, this was perfect production. I mean, sometimes she would do a costume change and you didn't know that you were looking at her on a screen. You couldn't tell the difference sometimes. It's so flawless, the production. But she's singing about putting on makeup and going on dates with boys and stuff. There's no content. But I feel like now, because of the computers and all this stuff now, um, it's everything is too technical, and there's not a lot of um, things, a lot of emotion. I played in a club one time, and I get to sometimes, well, you guys hit hard. I'm an old man. I'm still hitting hard, so you guys hit hard. Keep it down for the first set. That's the dinner set. That's one of the things that's destroyed jazz is serving food in the clubs. I can remember when the Vanguard had a hamburger. That was it. Lenny's on the Turnpike had a cheese plate and potato chips. That was it. Just something to munch on. Like if you go to the movies, something you don't have a whole um, uh, a meal and a wine list and a dessert cart and all this nonsense to go to a jazz club. That's why I think a lot of people start going. You got to go. I mean, they raised the price, and now you got to pay another thing. You got to eat dinner. I mean, most of the places you go in there, you see people standing. A lot of people, more people standing at the bar than sitting at the tables. And that was the musicians gave it up a lot. Well, that started happening. Plus now I've even been to clubs, they tell you how to dress. You got to wear a tie and a black suit, and this is the clubs telling you that. I mean, we're in show business. That's another thing that's been lost. I mean, when I would go see Dizzy Gillespie, that was not only profound music, but the highest entertainment. Clark Terry was entertaining. These people were entertaining. Even Coltrane had his thing. He had his crouch, you know, and that was his thing. He used to walk the bar and stuff, and that was we've lost a lot. With my band, I've been playing hardcore. I had a guitar band for a while where the thing is that anything is valid. I call it all hardcore. I said, well, what is this music? Is it heavy metal? Is it funk? Is it avant-garde? Is it bebop? Is it traditional jazz? And I said, yes. I mean, that's jazz, but I would also go into like just, with a regular quintet at a lot of clubs, and sometimes people would get up and dance. So I understand what the old guys were talking about when they said, where's the melody and can you dance to it? So that was quite a thing. Um, um, and because it came out of that. I was in Europe once, and they played the Coltrane, came on TV playing Alabama, and after he did the out of tempo thing, they went to the tempo and said, my God, I'm back at my prom. it was a dance, and a lot of things now it's intellectual, so many so-called rules, like actually cliches, and people, they want to do a perfect solo, or they not people don't take a lot of chances. I like people that take chances, and I take chances, and sometimes it'll. I had another great comment from David Crosby once. He would come and I'd sit in this club every Monday night, and he would come to hear the jam session, and so he took me up in the upper room because he wanted to talk to me. He was telling me that Graham Nash, they had a yacht they were staying on. He said, "Come down the boat because Graham Nash wants to start like a jazz rock band and everything." And the thing he told me is like, he said, "You know what? When you play, no matter how it comes out, you mean it." And that's another great comment that I think. I found that he was not a musical illiterate. I mean, the Coltrane was big in those days. As they were, that tune, the Byrds tune, was influenced by 8 Miles High. Was they interest? They were Coltrane. Also, "Baby Light My Fire" was influenced by Coltrane. But anyway, how long is he going to be gone?
Back.
Okay.
For you. I heard
Good.
about eating dinner in clubs. Lenny's on the Turnpike had a very good roast beef sandwich.
Oh, they did?
That was
They
their
did.
best thing besides the music.
But
They,
it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a wine list and all this, a cart with, all that crap. People go in there, they want to hear some music. I don't say, "Hey man, let's go to Birdland. They have great food." I mean, come on,
If I may
but
say briefly too, I think Bob mentioned this in a
well,
previous podcast. Feeling is missing, and I no longer see people dance. And
I
why don't
know.
people dance anymore? That's the whole point of music, is to dance to it.
Well, that should be there. You should move at least, like I was, I took when I was with Ray Charles, I had a tape of Miles Smiles, and I played in the dressing room. One of the cats said, "If you can't dance to that, you can't dance." We're not talking about dance steps, we're talking about moving your body, and I mean, that's what Coltrane would do. People get up and shout. I mean, one time in this club, Ray Mantia's band was playing, and they serve all this dinner and all this shit, and like the guy in the audience was his friend, and after this, not during the music, after the music, the applause, his friend shouted, "Yeah, what a band, what a band." Okay, great. The next thing, if they played another tune, and so again during the applause, he said, "Yeah, I told you so, what a band." And they came over to him, "Sir, you have to keep it down." This is when there's no music being played. Lorraine would be like a vulture in the village vanguard and tell people to shut up during the break. And I mean, who wants to go to places like that? But it tells you something about the music that people still go to those places. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what the vanguard is now. They didn't want to let me in. They told me at one point, we got to be, you have to be between the age of 30 and 50. They actually said that to me. I mean,
really?
I was leading the band
Oh.
in the van. Yeah, I'm serious. I was leading the band in the vanguard when Max Gordon died. It was the Mingus Dynasty, and the Tuesday was light, and I had to after Tuesday we had to turn it over every set. Plus, my picture was up on the wall with the Mingus Dynasty for 20 years, and they said, "You got to be between the ages of 30 and 50." I still got to talk my way. I've had to, Jed Eisman runs it now. I haven't talked to Jed in a long time, but I would talk to him if I have to. But
It's been there forever, yeah.
I even dated his sister, for a
Well,
while.
one thing for the Vanguard, they never did serve food that I can
Well,
remember.
they did. They had a hamburger at one time.
Did they at
And
one time, but not for
yeah.
not for long. The Half Note, by the way, had a really good Italian kitchen.
Oh yeah.
and you could have
yeah,
your minimum either in food or drink,
yeah,
and that also let young people come into the club
yeah, yeah,
because it wasn't a bar, it was actually a restaurant. So when I
yeah.
was 16, I could sit at the Half Moon. I could go 3, 4 times a week, and they sometimes they didn't always charge me the minimum because I didn't. 350 was still a lot of money then, 1968.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well,
nevertheless, I
a
wanted
while
to
ago,
ask you about a couple of other things.
okay, well, I want to mention when we were talking about the family and upbringing thing
Yeah.
was uh when my mother had all that. She used to own a jukebox when she was a kid, and she had her records. And there's all this like Coming Through the Rye and all that kind of stuff, which I wasn't impressed. So when rock and roll came along, I thought she had a good she had this guitar that was you couldn't play chords on it because the strings were raised, and you had a metal bar that you had to do
Like a
this.
Hawaiian guitar.
No, well, they called it. They said that's what it was. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't electric. It was an acoustic guitar, and like I got when the Rock Around the Clock and the flip side, 13 Women. Because I got where I could play the guitar solos. And so I wanted to play the guitar, but there was no uh no guitars in the school band. I'm telling you, the school had 100 people. You know. Uh, but anyway,
Well, usually guitar isn't a band instrument.
well,
It has
right,
most,
and the thing is, and then see, and everybody, they all the parents wanted their kid to try an instrument out at least, and so I she said, well, what do you want to play? And I said, well, I don't know. I guess that thing goes wah 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 to Clyde McCoy and Sugar Blues, and so there's the trumpet. I was used to do that, and my hand was barely long enough to
is
reach
that
the
a
end of
cup
the
mute? What
bill.
is that? What mute is that he plays
Well,
on?
actually, I have one from my music teacher gave me one. It's a plug mute with a bowl.
Oh, okay, that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing in the band with third. I found out from him that he never pushed the classical thing on me, but I got another one of his students, and I said, "You play jazz?" Oh no, I was the principal trumpet for the Philadelphia Orchestra for 20 years. So he had a good intuition. I used to go on this little Dixieland gig with them and polka bands and shit. But anyway, so I would want to quit a lot of times. And my mother would shame me into it because she was a frustrated violinist. She would shame me into it and say, well, you better call him up and tell him yourself. So I stuck with it. But the thing I remember is the first day at band, I was just watching the other guy and doing all this stuff. We were just playing a G to a C,
You're
and
like
then
9 or 10 years old, right? You're like 9 or 10.
I was 9, yeah. And a couple of
Yeah.
weeks later, I had this little book we were playing out, and I went to the back of the book and I played this thing, and I played what I thought it was. It was nothing like it was,
It
you
was
know.
not-
But also when I was 10, that's when I wrote my first tune. It was the Blues with a Bridge, and because
Wow.
she brought this Dixieland record with a guy named Pee Wee Irwin.
Oh, yeah.
It was a 10-inch, and uh, then what happened was that she said, well, maybe this will inspire you. So when I was 10, she took me to this Louis Armstrong concert,
Oh,
and I got to meet him because he was, I don't know how he could do it, but he let all these people through his dressing room and give autographs
so
and talk to them.
right wing and all, she still dug Louis Armstrong.
Oh yeah, she loved all that. Yeah, and she was from the South. They loved it, but they were all messed up racially. But anyway, they so I met him backstage, showed him my mouthpiece, talked to him about playing the trumpet and everything,
Oh, wow.
and uh, uh, also, and I would run around, and Edmund Hall had one of the first flight bags, those little blue flight
Clarinetist.
bags.
If you don't know Edmund Hall,
Yeah, and he was
trumpet player. And
he's and he had a bottle of whiskey, half, and they're all in their shirt sleeves and all that stuff. This is life for me, man. And also another thing that changed me musically was Trummy Young would have this feature called The Faithful Husser. And it's the most heavy metal shit I ever heard in my life. That was
Really?
it. That was it for the rock and roll thing. I still would like the occasional Little Richard and Laverne Baker or something, but Elvis, you're gone, you know. And so, but that was the first I got to talk to him. I don't know if I don't think I blew his horn. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if I did, because he was like that. You know what I mean? But I showed him my mouthpiece and everything and all that, and it was like that was my first actual concert of seeing a professional musical band, Louis
Wow.
Armstrong. And I saw him again.
It's a start.
He came back to Billings again. I guess there was a recording of that somewhere. And like the thing is like all these guys, you know, like you know who were talking about pops all the time. I doubt if you heard them live. But anyway, it's like those guys were raucous and loud, man. They came up in a time when there wasn't even a microphone, you know. And those guys were, you know, that's the jazz. Rock and roll was little wimpy, soft stuff compared to Trummy Young and Louis Armstrong. And so I was into that until I was, you know, I went to this band camp in California with where I met Matt Goldsberry, and that I was into like New Orleans style. I was playing that style for like my first 8 years.
Remember, you and I
Playing.
were talking the other day. We mentioned something, and you said you had a critique. Somebody gave you a review where it said your sound was too big.
Yeah, I was when I this is where Berklee started going down. I'm not afraid to admit it because when I went there, like I said, it's the best place you go in some of the best years of my life because we were inspired to do things. I even put bicycle chains in the piano once.
Right.
Yeah, cool, you know. And like so, my last evaluation, I'd been playing flugelhorn for a while. I don't play it much anymore. I kind of refer to it as the chicken shit of foam because I think it seems like most people that play the flugelhorn you can't get a very good sound on trumpet. You know, you got Tom Harold and you got Art Farmer, Clark Terry. Those were the guys that, you
Ira
know,
Sullivan too got a beautiful flugelhorn sound.
yeah. And like those were the cats and like so I've been playing flugelhorn for I don't know a couple of years pretty much exclusively. And so I went back to the trumpet and I went in for my evaluation on the trumpet, and after I already got a bigger sound in my ears, and they said this right before he graduated, says, "Oh, you know what? Your sound is too big. It sounds more like a flugelhorn than a trumpet." I said, "Yeah, okay, good. I'll remember that." And I said, that was it. I said, "Bye," you know.
So you went out to California after Berklee, right? Isn't that where you first landed? Like we finished Berklee.
Yeah, there was a band in Boston. This guy was actually this band. They heard the Electric Flag, but we were doing this jazz rock thing before Blood, Sweat, and Tears actually came out and did their record, but it never went off the ground because they were in this cult of macrobiotics, and
Right?
we go to 4-hour rehearsal, 1 hour rehearsing, and 3 hours eating dinner, and
Macroneurotic.
yeah, and Gary Peacock was the bass player in
I was going to
Boston.
ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and but we went to California, and
So you went out there with Peacock. I mean, he was in the band in Boston, and then he ended up
but
in
no,
California.
Peacock didn't go when we went out to Boston. We went to uh we went out there with a couple of guys. There was a guy named Franny Pinto. There was a saxophone player and a writer, and Art Barron, the trombone player, went
Oh,
out.
all right, sure.
And the guy that was the leader was a guy named Lenny Capizzi. He wrote the Monster Mash, and
The Graveyard Smash.
yeah, but he was, you know, the problem was his piano playing. He wasn't very good at it, but he had a better head for that and everything because he's had with these things. He said Sam Rivers played in his band sometimes, and you know his R&B bands and stuff. But we went out to California and we got the bass player from the Mother's Invention, Roy Estrada, the woo that guy, you know, and the saxophone player played with us for a minute, and Jay Graydon, you ever heard of Jay Graydon, guitar player? He was one of the biggest producers for a while. He did he did the arrangement of Twilight Zone for Manhattan Transfer, and a bunch. He played on everybody's record, and he billionaire produced all these things. You know, he was he's on the record, the Wayne Shorter record with Milton Nascimento.
Right, native dancer.
Yeah, and we had these kind of cats, and we were supposed to break through, but we never did. They were living in the house, macrobiotic house, but it was like it was some other stuff. We were a fusion, but we were based more on like the jazz, like of the guys like Coltrane and those people, you know.
Right.
We played a gig backing up the Platters in Boston, and I wrote this tune called "Take Anti-War Song, Take Another Little Piece of My Body," and then the intro starts out with Ascension.
Oh no.
And the guy fired us. And then he went in, and they had these other. We went to pick our drums up there, where these other people couldn't cut it, so they hired us back. Earl Warren was the music director at that time. You know,
Earl Warren from Count Basie's band.
Yeah.
The original lead alto player with Count Basie. So he was the director of. Wait a minute, Jack. He was the musical director of what?
Of the Platters. He was the conductor.
Platters. I see.
Yeah.
You guys were opposite the Platters, and you started out with Ascension.
Yeah, Peacock was on that gig. He brought
Peacock was your bass player.
He was brought on this, and he wrote this tune. I can remember it was great, called Hog Hop. I've been looking for that ever since, you know. And it was.
Well, what was he like, man? I mean, how was he older than you at that point? Was he a couple of years older? He was like
probably
8 years older than you.
Probably he and Billy. He was there because Billy Elgart was the drummer. Do you know Billy?
I knew Billy, yeah. And I asked Clay once about Peacock, and I said, "What's he like?" And he said, "He's mercurial."
Oh yeah,
and that was what he said. But what kind of experience did you have with Gary?
Well, it was okay. You know, it was the reason he was there because Billy was there, and they'd just done a record with Paul Blake called Mr. Joy.
I remember that record.
And so it was okay. But then I saw him the Vanguard years later, and I reintroduced myself. And he said, well, about Lenny Capizzi and all that stuff. And he was kind of rude. He says, yeah, so what? Maybe, you know, he was weird, man. And also I was trying to get something up with Art Landy. I mentioned Gary Peacock was in this band, and they were teaching the same place. I never heard of this guy. I don't know. I guess he could be. They call him Gary P. Brains sometimes. He's not alive anymore, is he?
No, he died a year or two ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just always wondered because I never got to know him, and he always seemed like standoffish to me. So I never really made any attempt to. I heard him play live, and I admired his playing. But, you know, he just was that. Now, so what brought you to New York? So now you're in California. And
I went to Berklee.
Up to New York.
I went out there with that band. And I was doing things, and Art Barron came back, and a trombone player named Glenn Ferris. We came.
Glenn is a good friend of mine, man. I love Glenn Ferris.
We became tight for quite a bit, but I kind of cut him loose after a while because we was Mike Clark on me was this says, do you want to do another tour with me, Glenn, and me, Glenn, and Buster Williams. So I called up Glenn, and he says, well, I'll let you know. I got to have equal billing. Yeah, cool. All right. And then I called him up. I said, you know, would you want to, what's the word? Oh, I don't think it'd be good for my career. I gave, he was homeless, and then he stayed with me in New York, and he was living.
And he had that family. He had this crazy wife.
Oh yeah, and both of them, and his other wife after that was just as bad. She's crazy too. Yeah,
he ended up leaving them all and going to Paris, right?
Well, the one he had in Paris was just as bad, you know.
Oh, right. She's not.
But you know, that was, I said, what the hell is that? I mean, you didn't have a gig and everything when I gave you, you know, and all this, and we're not good for his career, you know. So, you know, later, you know.
Hell of a trombone player, though.
Yeah, I know, I know. At first he was doing all the yeah stuff, but then he did a different thing.
Well,
But
one thing that's interesting about our generation too, I found, is that we played because the outside influence was prevalent, was
yeah,
there. There were,
yeah,
Trade had done Ascension. There was Albert Eiler. There was Archie Shepp. There were people playing very avant-garde, and then there were. It was sort of like there was also a straight ahead kind of thing, and there were a whole bunch of people that could do both. I
yeah,
mean, like Mingus was, of course, one of those people. Jackie
yeah.
Foster, Andrew Hill,
Dolphin, yeah.
Eric Dolphy, Roland Kirk, Rassan.
Oh, Roland Kirk. That's the first guy I ever sat in with. I got a story about that.
Oh, let me know. What was that like?
Well, it was again this trombone player. I mean, he was a valve trombone player, but then now he plays the shit out of piano, and he's also he's I guess he's played the slide trombone with the San Francisco Symphony sometimes. I mean, he's like I have to hate to say, but like an idiot savant. He's like ridiculous guy that can do all these things, but
Mhm.
he's always paying tribute to somebody else. He doesn't push his own music that much, you know. And but we went in and to Roland Kirk, and he was playing at the jazz workshop, and I asked if I could sit in, and he says, "Yeah." He said, "Next set, what do you want to play?" And I said, "Well, I have this record of yours called Kirk in Copenhagen, and you play a thing called the Mingus Griff song. I'd like to play that." And he said, "Okay, I'm going to play My Ship, and then after that, I'm going to call you up." Well, after he did My Ship, he gave like a 10-15 speech how honored he was to have these wonderful musicians were going to sit in with him. And the first time in his career, anyone requested to play one of his tunes. And I mean, we couldn't play bad after that. I mean, he was building us up these wonderful, excellent, great musicians. We were Berklee students, Hal Galper sat in too. And that was,
Oh,
and he taught Hal Galper the tune on the bandstand.
really?
Because like the first eight was like a confirmation, and then the bridge was like a minor thing, you know. And that was, I mean, he's always, and he was one of the few people that would encourage me and come up with me and look at my mute and said, "Wow," and all this kind of stuff. And I saw him when Mingus was in the hospital. He died before Mingus, if I remember right. And he was always a supporter. See, I had always, my coming up was like, I would show up and all these people, like a lot of my peers and stuff, was, oh, here's that Ornette Coleman guy again. And like, I would get stuff like that. But the comments I got were usually from Larry Coryell, would ask me to sit in. And even I asked him if he'd play a tune on my record, and he said, "I'll play the whole record and memorize the music." And even I didn't memorize the
I
music.
heard some of that. It's a nice record.
And George Coleman, and these people and our Clark Terry, and like I said, and like I was playing a jam session in Europe after the gig one time, and Dizzy walked up to me and says, "I like the notes you play." And that's the kind of compliment I would get, compliments from guys like that, but not like the sort of the people my age. They were trying to play like those guys, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I
I'm
think you confused people. I mean, somebody once told me I kind of confused them too for a while because we could play different ways. And somebody
Yeah,
said, well, the avant-garde guys think that you're a bebopper, and the beboppers think you're avant-garde.
yeah.
So you kind of don't fall into a codified category.
Well, that's what the thing is. When people are you bebop or avant-garde? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a method to it.
We're the
Well,
whole thing. Yeah,
I'm of my generation. I mean, trying to play music that's in the world. I
Yeah.
mean, but I mean, so then when now I just want to get to one little thing. You had a brief period of working with Ray Charles's band,
I had a year. Yeah, I did a
and
tour.
Ray
Yeah.
Charles was notorious. He had guys on that band. I used to know guys that played in that big band, and they were quaking in their boots because they were afraid every day they were going to get fired because they said Ray was quite a
Oh, he was.
difficult.
I mean, playing with Mingus was like the Easter Bunny compared to Ray Charles. You
Really.
know. Yeah, he was like a. It was ridiculous. It was like he was just an asshole. I mean, there's no other better word for it. But I count that from the time where I really was able to call myself a professional. I had a tape that I made with Glenn and Billy Elgart and Reggie Johnson and Bruce Cale, two bass players, one from California. Some of it sounds pretty. I kind of count that as a starting point where I could stand myself a little bit. You know, I'm my worst critic, and like Ray Charles was playing because Blue Mitchell was sitting next to me. I mean, Mitchell probably never played it above an A on his horn, but man, he was like intimidated the shit out of me. It was so soulful and so beautiful that when he played, he got fired. Ray tried to hire him back for, you know, we were all making like $300 a week. Ray tried to hire him back a few days later, and he said no. The John Mayhall, the blues guy from England, hired him. He was making $1,500 a week. We're talking about 1971. You know what I'm saying? And so he didn't. But that's why I learned really to play. Hog Cooper was the baritone player, and that was great. And he was one of the best baritone players I've ever heard. Do you know him, Leroy Cooper?
No.
Oh, he's one of the cats. And like one time something was wrong with his horn, and he played. So Ray lent him his alto, and he played the baritone parts on alto, and it sounded like a baritone. I swear to God, you know.
Wow.
After Blue was fired, then Marcus Belgrave came in, and Marcus didn't intimidate me so much as Blue did. You know, I could keep up with Marcus. I found a bootleg where we have a trumpet battle. We were in Italy. Everything comes out of Italy, and James Clay, he was there.
Oh, he was on the band too.
Yeah, and Henry Coker was there. He quit in the middle of the tour.
Bonus.
Those were probably the name. Andy Ennis was a tenor sax player. He was Ethel Ennis. Do you know her, the singer? She was his
sure.
brother, you know. And I got my friend, the valve trombone player on the band, you know. It'd be ridiculous.
When I met Johnny Coles, he was working with Ray.
I took his place. Yeah, he left. Yeah, in fact, they did it right before they had an article that came out, and it was Henry Coker and Johnny Coles, and Blue were the article. And then the first meeting we had with Ray Charles did his up and down screaming shit. It was about he was pissed off because Johnny Coles said it was like being in the army, and he was pissed off at the band, and none of those people were even, you know, Blue and Coker were more cool than Johnny Coles.
Did Johnny Coles tell him that directly? He said this is like being in the army. Was that how it came out? Or
that was in the Downbeat article. It was a big article.
Oh, I see.
You know, and so he yelled at the band for a while. But sometime I got so drunk one time I actually threw up in my horn.
Oh no.
And Blue Mitchell said, "Hey man, it's throwing up in your." I said, "I got to play the part." And then Blue had it down where an 8-bar rest, he would fall asleep, and he'd wake up just in time to play his part. And the other. My friend and everything. I mean, you'd get really drunk sometimes. It would be out there. And my friend, the trombone player, one time got so drunk, he just he laid down his horn down on the chair, and he walked out in front of the band and laid down on the floor.